I have piped enough men on and off enough birds to know, in about 10 seconds, what kind of shooter is standing in front of me. That is the honest, ugly truth of it, and I want it on the record before I tell you the rest, because the rest only means anything if you know how wrong a man can be while feeling absolutely certain. The morning they attached her to us, I was certain. We had come off the high country with a mission gone to rot behind us. I will keep the details of the mission where they belong, which is buried, but the shape of it is this. We had gone up the Talve to put eyes on something. The something had eyes of its own, and by the third night the whole valley knew we were there. When that happens, you do not finish the job. You leave. You leave fast, and you leave loud enough to be gone before the people who want you dead can close the doors. We had one route out that a wheeled convoy could take, and that route ran through the Dushara Pass, a cut in the rock so narrow and so old that shepherds had names for individual boulders in it. I was the assistant team leader. That meant I ran the loadout, the order of march, and the thousand small arguments that a team has before it moves, and it meant that when a slick came in low over the staging hide with a single passenger and a hard case as long as a man, I was the one who walked out to meet it with my jaw already set. She stepped down easy, not showing off, not favoring the altitude the way the fresh ones do when they first taste air this thin. She had the weathered look I respect on paper and distrust on a stranger, a face that had been out in real weather, hands that had done real work, a way of setting her feet that said she had carried heavy things over bad ground for a long time. Sergeant First Class, Army tab, no unit patch I could read, which by itself should have told me something and instead just annoyed me. She had a rifle case and a spotting scope and a ruck packed the way a person packs when they intend to be self-sufficient, and she had a quiet about her that I mistook, right then, for meekness. "Chief Warwick," she said, reading my collar, "they told me to find the ATL." "You found him." I did not offer a hand. "I'll be straight with you, Sergeant. I asked for a lot of things off that bird. A shooter I never met wasn't on the list." "Understood," she said, just that. No flinch, no speech about how she'd earned her seat, no scramble to make me like her. Understood. She said it the way you'd confirm a grid, and then she waited, and the waiting bothered me more than an argument would have. Here is what I told myself in those 10 seconds, and I am not proud of a word of it. I told myself the brass had done what the brass loves to do, which is decorate a hard mission with a checkbox. I told myself somebody upstairs wanted a woman shooter on the manifest so a slide in a briefing somewhere would look modern, and they had reached into a schoolhouse and pulled out whichever qualified instructor was standing closest to the door. I looked at the clean case and the careful ruck, and I saw a range coach. I saw a paper ticket. I saw a person who could put rounds in black on a square range with a spotter calling wind for her and a sandbag under her forearm and all the time in the world. And I decided in the space of a breath that in the Dushara Pass at first light with the doors coming shut she would be, at best, one more body to keep alive. I have paid for a lot of decisions in my life. I have never paid more for one made faster. "You'll ride rear vehicle," I told her. "Stay with the trucks. If it goes bad, you keep your head down and you let my guys work. This isn't a range." "Copy," she said. And that was the whole of it. That was the entire conversation in which I decided who Marin Vale was, and she let me decide it. And only much later did I understand that letting me decide it was itself the most disciplined thing I watched anybody do that entire deployment. She had a card in her hand that would have ended the argument in one move, and she did not play it, because she had learned somewhere, a hardware, I would bet, that a man who has to be told a thing does not believe it, and a man who sees a thing cannot help but believe it, and there is no third kind of man worth spending words on. She shouldered her case and walked back toward the trucks, and I turned to the loading, and I thought about her for exactly no more seconds that morning. The team thought about her a little longer and not kindly. We were tired and we were spooked, and a tired, spooked team looks for something small to be sure about. She was small and she was new and she was, in their read, safe to be sure about, so she caught it the way the new attachment always catches it, the low talk, the loud silence when she walked up, the two guys who suddenly needed to discuss something private whenever she came near the fire. Petty things. The kind of thing that means nothing and reveals everything. Ray's was the worst of it, and Ray's was my guy, so it was on me. Ray's had a mouth on him that made the long nights shorter and made mornings like this one worse. He got a look at the rifle case when she set it down to adjust her ruck, got a look at the profile of the thing through the foam cutout when she opened it to check the glass, and he came to me grinning like he'd found treasure. Chief, you see what the schoolhouse sent us?" He said schoolhouse the way you'd say a punchline. "Bolt gun. A bolt gun, Chief. We're running for the doors and they sent us a lady with a bolt gun to teach us about breath control." I should have shut it down. What I did instead was let a tired grin get away from me, because I was tired too, and because a bolt gun in that country at that moment did look to me like exactly the wrong tool, slow, single-fed, a precision instrument for a patient day, and we were not going to get a patient day. I let the grin get away from me and Ray's read it as license, which is what a mouth like Ray's reads everything as, and the joke had its blessing, and it went around the fire the way those jokes do. The bet started somewhere in there. I did not start it and I did not stop it, which as the ATL are the same sin. Somebody, it might even have been me, I have stopped protecting myself in this telling, said something to the effect that the schoolhouse shooter would never break 800 meters in real weather with real people shooting back, that a square-range paper ticket was one thing and a pass full of men who wanted you dead was another, and that our money was safe. 800 meters. I want you to hold that number. 800 meters was the ceiling we put on her, laughing, the ceiling on what we were willing to believe a woman off a bird with a bolt gun could do, and we set it low on purpose, because a low ceiling is easier to feel superior beneath. She heard it. She had to have heard it. The fire was small and the night was quiet and sound carries in cold, thin air the way it carries over water. She did not come to the fire to defend herself. She did not go cold and wounded and make us feel it either, which is the move I have seen 100 underestimated people make, and which never once changed a single mind. She sat with her back against the rear truck's tire, and by the light of a red lens she went through her own small liturgy, and if you had known what you were looking at you would have stopped laughing right then. I did not know what I was looking at, but I watched her anyway, the way you half-watch anything moving in a hide at night, and some part of me, some older, better part that the tired part had shouted down, logged it and kept it. She was reading the pass. She had a map out and a notebook, and she was not looking at either the way a person looks who is killing time. She would look at the map, and then she would look up and out into the dark toward where the Dushara cut through the ridgeline, though there was nothing to see out there but black on black, and then she would write something small, and then she would do it again. She had a little instrument in her hand that I clocked and dismissed, a wind meter, one of those pager-sized things that reads temperature and pressure and the density of the air you're breathing, and she was feeding it numbers, or it was feeding her numbers, and she was writing those down too. Elevation. The little dial work of a scope she wasn't even looking through yet, done from memory, done the way a musician runs scales without thinking. She built a whole page in the red dark of a fight that had not happened yet, in a place she had never been, from a map and the feel of the air on her face. I did not understand that I was watching a professional prepare. I thought she was nervous. I actually thought, God help me, that the paperwork was how the schoolhouse instructor soothed herself before a scary drive. That is how completely I had decided who she was. I had a fact in front of me, plain as the cold, and I fit it to the wrong picture because I had already framed the picture and hung it on the wall. Somewhere past midnight she came and found me, not to argue, to report, which I did not have the sense to recognize as the difference. Chief, a minute. I gave her the minute the way you give a subordinate a minute you don't think they've earned. She crouched, and she turned the map so the fire's edge caught it, and she put one blunt finger on the throat of the Dushara Pass, where the contour lines crowded up on both sides into a shape I knew, and did not like. "This," she said. "The route bends here hard, and the wall's close to maybe 40 meters at the neck. High ground both sides, and this shoulder on the north wall." Her finger moved. "This shoulder looks down the whole length of the approach and the whole length of the bend. If I wanted to kill a convoy in this country, I would kill it here, and I would put my gun on that shoulder, and I would spring it when the lead vehicle was through the bend, and the tail was still in the straight, so nobody can go forward and nobody can go back." She was not asking me anything. She was telling me the ground. "That's a lot of ifs," I said. "One if," she said. "It's the only if. There's no other place on this route where a small force does more with less. Everywhere else the walls are open enough to fight out of. Here they aren't. If they mean to hit us, they hit us here." She let that sit. Then quieter, the only time all night she came near to asking me for anything. "I'd like to be up on that north shoulder before the convoy runs the neck. Not in the trucks. Up high early, eyes on that killing ground before we ever put a bumper into it." And I told her no. I want to be exact about why I told her no, because the reasons felt like reasons and were only fear wearing reasons' clothes. I told her the terrain was too broken to get a vehicle up that spur, and I wasn't splitting a shooter off on foot in the dark on a route we had to run at speed. I told her our security plan was set, and I wasn't rewriting the order of march at midnight on the word of an attachment I'd known for 6 hours. I told her that if it went bad in the neck, the answer was to push through hard and fast under our own guns, the way SEALs answer everything, and that I did not need a sniper on a rock. I needed bodies in the trucks. All of that was true, and all of that was cowardice, because underneath every word of it was the thing I would not say out loud, which was, "I do not believe you can do what you are telling me you can do." I had put the ceiling at 800 meters by the fire, and now here she was calmly proposing to reach out from a high shoulder across a whole kill zone and unmake an ambush before it finished springing, and every mile of that was above my ceiling, so I called it reckless instead of calling it what it was, which was the single best idea anyone offered that whole night. "Ride rear vehicle," I said. "That's the plan. We move at first light." She looked at me for a moment, not angry, measuring, the way you'd measure a wall you were going to have to get over one way or another. "Copy, Chief," she said, and she folded the map, and she went back to her tire and her red lens and her notebook, and she kept reading the pass anyway, kept building the page, kept dialing the scope in her head for a fight I had just forbidden her to prepare for. I rolled up in my own gear a few feet from the fire, and I slept the flat, gray, dreamless sleep of a man who is sure he has made the right calls. And above me on the ridgeline, the Dushara Pass waited in the cold exactly where she had put her finger, exactly shaped the way she had said it would be shaped, patient as a trap that already knows it is a trap. We staged in the blue dark before dawn. There is an hour in the high country before the sun clears the peaks when everything goes the color of a gun. The rock, the sky, the breath in front of your face, the metal of the trucks, all of it one flat blued gray, no shadows yet, no warmth, the cold sitting on your skin like a hand. The men moved quiet through it, checking loads, testing comms, that last hushed liturgy before a movement, and I walked the line of vehicles the way an ATL does, touching each one. A word here, a hand on a shoulder there, feeling the team's temperature through my palms. Vale was at the rear vehicle where I'd put her, but she wasn't stowing her rifle in the truck. She had it out, slung across her back, and her ruck was cinched tight and high, and she had that spotting scope on her chest. And when I came even with her, I understood in one look that she had made a decision in the night that was not my decision. "I'm going up on the shoulder, Chief," she said, not defiant, flat. A professional informing a professional of a thing she had judged necessary. "On foot ahead of the convoy. I'll be in position before your lead vehicle reaches the bend. If the pass is empty, I've wasted a hard climb and you can laugh about it at the LZ. If it isn't," she settled the sling, "you'll want me where I'm going to be, and you'll want me there early." Every part of me that had been certain the day before flared up hot. She was countermanding the order of march. She was splitting off alone, on foot, in the dark, on the exact wild plan I had killed at the fire. Every instinct of command told me to plant my feet and say the word that stops a subordinate cold. "I want to tell you I said something wise." "I didn't," I said. "That's not the plan, Sergeant." "It's the plan that keeps your team alive," she said. And for the first time there was something under the flatness, not heat, not insubordination, but a kind of iron patience, the patience of someone who has been in exactly this argument before, with exactly this kind of man, and has learned that the argument is not worth winning if the ground can be won instead. "You can put me on a charge at the LZ. I'll sign whatever you want. But I'm not going to sit in a truck in that neck and be a passenger to my own team, getting killed, because the ATL didn't like the shape of my case." And then she did the thing I have thought about every day since. She didn't wait for my permission. She also didn't defy me to my face and make me stop her, force the confrontation, make it a thing of rank and ego there in the blue dark with the men watching. She simply turned and started up the broken ground toward the north shoulder at a steady, roped-in, altitude-wise pace, the pace of someone who has climbed 1,000 hard slopes with a rifle on their back, and she left me standing there with the word that stops a subordinate cold still sitting unused in my mouth. She gambled that I would not order a man to physically drag her back down. She gambled that some part of me, the older, better part, wanted her up on that shoulder even while the tired, proud part wanted to be right. She was correct on both counts. I let her go. I told myself I let her go because chasing her would break Noy's discipline and cost us time we didn't have. That was true, and it was not the reason. The reason was that I had run out of ways to be certain, and a man who has run out of certainty and won't admit it does the thing she's already doing and calls it his own idea afterward. "Rear vehicles light a shooter," Reyes muttered, watching her diminish up the gray slope. "Guess the schoolhouse wants a view." I didn't laugh this time. I don't know why. Something in the set of her back going up that rock, the economy of it, the way she never once slipped on ground that had two of my youngest guys cursing when we'd crossed worse. Something had started very quietly to come loose in the frame I'd hung her in. Not enough. Not nearly enough yet. But the first nail. "Mount up," I said. "We move." The trucks rolled at first gray light, and the Dushara took us in the way a throat takes a swallow. I have run a lot of bad ground. I have never felt a place want us dead the way that pass did. The walls came up on both sides, first gentle, then close, then closer, the tan rock streaked black where 1,000 years of snowmelt had run down it. And the road, if you could call the old caravan track a road, bent and narrowed, until the walls were doing exactly what she'd said they would do, crowding down toward the neck where a man could have thrown a stone across the whole width of our world. I sat in the lead vehicle, and I watched those walls climb, and I felt the certainty of the night before curdling in my gut, because a body knows a kill zone before a mind will admit it, and my body was screaming while my mouth stayed shut. Up on the north shoulder, somewhere above and ahead, was a woman I'd benched, in a position I'd forbidden, reading a fight I'd refused to believe in. I keyed my radio once low. "Rooftop lead. You set?" Her voice came back the way it had said understood the day before. Level, unhurried. A little breath behind it from the climb, and under the breath that iron calm. "Set. Good eyes on the neck and the bend, Chief." A pause, the pause of someone choosing to be gentle with a proud man in his last quiet moment. "Slow your lead vehicle at the bend. Don't commit the whole convoy into the straight past the neck until I clear it. If I'm wrong, you lose 90 seconds. If I'm right, you keep your men." I should have slowed. Everything true in me wanted to slow. But we were strung out now, 4 vehicles in the cut with the walls too tight to turn, and slowing a strung-out convoy in a neck is its own kind of death, and I was still, God forgive me, still the man who'd set the ceiling at 800 meters. "Pushing through," I said. "Fast is safe. Keep your eyes open." There was the smallest silence on the net. Not an argument. A professional absorbing a bad order she could not override and adjusting her whole plan around it in the half-second she had. "Copy," she said, "pushing through. I've got the shoulder. Get your lead through the bend and get down." We hit the neck. The lead vehicle nosed into the bend, and the walls were 40 meters apart just like she'd drawn it. And for one held breath the world was only tires on old stone and the blued morning and my own pulse. And I thought, the shameful, fleeting thought of a man about to be proven catastrophically wrong. She read it too dark. Empty pass. 90 seconds saved. Then the horseshoe sprang. It sprang exactly the way she'd said a smart enemy would spring it, which is to say all at once and from three sides, with the lead vehicle through the bend, and the tail still in the straight so that nobody could go forward and nobody could go back. The first burst was a crew-served gun, a heavy, slow, hammering thing up on the south wall, higher than us, angled down, and it walked a line of strikes across the hood of my truck and through the windshield and into the driver beside me before the sound of it even finished reaching my ears. Glass and blood and the engine dying. Then the whole pass came apart into noise. Small arms off both walls, the flat, vicious crack of rounds coming down at us from elevation, the deeper cough of a launcher, and the road behind us blooming orange as an RPG took the number 3 truck in the flank and stood it half over on its side with men still in it. We were dead. I need you to understand that in the plain, flat language of a man who has been in a lot of fights and knows the difference between a bad one and a lost one. We were dead. The lead truck was killed. The 3 truck was burning. We were pinned in a 40-meter neck with high ground on both sides fully occupied. No way forward, no way back, no air on station, no quick reaction force inside an hour's flight, and a crew-served gun up on the south wall that had us cold. There is a specific silence that lives inside all that noise, the silence in a leader's chest when he understands he has run his men into a killing ground, and there is no move on the board that saves them. I have felt it exactly once. I felt it there. I got my door open on the dead side of the truck, and I dragged my wounded driver out over the seats and down behind the engine block, and rounds were coming through the truck bed like it was canvas, and I could hear Rays on the net screaming grids that didn't matter because there was nobody to send them to, and I could hear men dying, and I did the only thing left to a pinned leader, which is try to build a base of fire out of the survivors and buy seconds nobody could spend. We were putting rounds up at muzzle flashes we could barely see against the brightening rock, up into the high ground, and it was nothing. It was noise answering noise. That crew-served gun on the south wall traversed onto our knot of survivors behind the lead truck, and I watched the rock stitch toward us, and I put my body over my wounded driver, and I thought, clear as church bells, this is the one. This is the ground I don't leave. And then, under all of it, under the hammer of the gun and the crack of the small arms and the roar of the burning truck, I heard a sound that did not belong to the enemy. It was a single, deep, deliberate report from up and behind from the north shoulder. Not a burst, not the panic fire we were throwing up at shadows. One round, flat and heavy and final, rolling down the rock walls a half-second late the way a big bolt gun's voice always arrives after its work is done. And the crew-served gun on the south wall stopped. Just stopped. Mid-traverse, mid-burst, the hammer of it cut off clean in the middle of a beat, and in the sudden gap where that gun had been I heard the second round already coming, that same deep, deliberate report, one and a pause, the long, patient pause of a bolt being worked by hands that were not hurrying. And up on the south wall, a second position that had been raining down on our tail went silent too. I did not understand yet. In the roar and the terror, I only knew that 2 of the guns killing us had died a heartbeat apart, and that the sound that killed them had come from the shoulder where I'd forbidden a schoolhouse instructor to go. "That's her," Rays said on the net, and his voice had a crack in it I'd never heard from him. "Chief, that's her, that's the bolt gun." Up on the north shoulder, alone, prone on cold rock with a fight she had read in the dark the night before spread out beneath her exactly as she'd drawn it, Marin Vale had begun, without hurry and without a single wasted round, to take the Dushara Pass apart. Here is the thing about a bolt gun that Rays had joked about by the fire and that I finally understood lying in the blood behind a dead truck. It is slow, and its slowness is the whole point. A machine gun sprays a cone at a problem and hopes. A bolt gun in the right hands does not hope. It selects. Every round is a decision made whole, range read, angle read, wind read, the target chosen out of chaos for a reason, the trigger broken clean, the bolt worked, the next decision begun. In a pass full of men throwing hundreds of rounds at shadows, one woman was spending single rounds like a surgeon spends cuts, and every single one of them was landing on the specific throat of the specific thing that was killing us most, in the specific order that unmade the ambush fastest. She had killed the crew-served gun first because the crew-served gun was the anchor of the whole horseshoe. She'd killed the south wall support gun second because it had the best angle on our pinned tail. And now, in the gap those two silences opened, the first gap we'd had, the first half-breath where the volume of fire coming down on us dropped from a killing storm to something men could live inside. I heard her voice on the net, and it was the calmest sound in the entire world. Lead rooftop. Crew guns down, south supports down. You've got a window. I need your lead element out of the truck and moving to the north wall base, tight against the rock right now. The north wall's got a dead angle their shooters can't reach and I can cover it. Move your wounded first. I'll keep their heads down. Go when I fire. I want to tell you I gave a crisp order. What I did was obey her. Every man in that pass, SEAL and attachment alike, every operator who 6 hours before had laughed about the schoolhouse and her bolt gun. We all, without a word of discussion, started taking orders from the sergeant on the rock, because she was the only person in the Dushara Pass who sounded like she knew how it ended, and drowning men do not argue with the hand that reaches down. Go, she said, and fired. And up on the far wall a shooter who'd have cut us to pieces as we broke cover simply wasn't there anymore, and we went. We ran the wounded first, the way she said. Reyes and I carried my driver between us, and 2 of the boys dragged Tavo out of the tipped-over 3 truck with his leg wrong under him, and we ran that open ground to the base of the north wall while overhead and behind us, the fight kept trying to close its jaws and could not, because every time a gun found an angle on us, that deep, deliberate report rolled down off the shoulder and the gun stopped. One and a pause. One and a pause. She never rushed. That was the thing that hollowed me out even as she was saving my life. She never once rushed. The whole world was screaming and hemorrhaging, and she worked that bolt at the pace of a woman doing something she had done 10,000 times, each round its own small verdict, and the pass emptied of enemy guns one patient decision at a time. We reached the dead angle at the base of the north wall and pressed into the cold rock, and for the first time since the neck, we were not being hit. Men were breathing. Men were alive who had been 30 seconds from not being. And they knew exactly who to thank, and I saw it going around the huddle in their faces. The same reframing that had started in me on the slope at dawn, now finishing all at once in every one of them. But it wasn't over, and she knew it before we did. Lead rooftop, that level voice. Their gun line's broken, but they've got a maneuver element. I count 6, maybe 8, dismounting up the south draw to come down into the pass on foot and finish you at the base of that wall. They know you're in my dead angle. They're going to try to flush you out into the open where their remaining shooters can reach. I'm going to service that maneuver element before it reaches you. It's going to take me a few minutes and it's going to be loud on your end because they'll shoot at my position once they make me. Hold the wall. Do not come out. Trust the angle. I've got this. I've got this. 2 words from a woman I told to keep her head down and let my guys work, and I believed her the way you believe the ground under your feet. And then the enemy did make her position, because a gun that keeps firing eventually shows itself, and every remaining shooter on the south wall turned their fire onto the north shoulder, onto her, and I lay at the base of that wall, and I listened to a whole ambush try to kill the one person keeping us alive. The rock around her position came apart under that fire. I could see it from below, the spall and dust kicking off the shoulder where she lay, a storm of it, rounds by the dozens searching for the woman who had unmade their perfect trap. And through that storm, without a break in the rhythm, without one hurried round, came that same deep report, one, and a pause, and the bolt worked. As she took the south-draw maneuver element apart on its way down, man by deliberate man, while a wall's worth of guns tried to erase her. I found out later, the after-action pieced it together from her position and the fallen, that she never moved off that shoulder. She had picked it in the dark from a map because it looked down the whole kill zone, and it looked down the whole kill zone because it was exposed to the whole kill zone, and she had known that when she chose it. She had chosen a position that let her save us and painted a target on her own back to do it. And when the fire came for her, she did not displace, and she did not flinch, and she did not slow her rhythm by a single beat. She lay in that storm and kept spending her single patient rounds on the men coming to kill us, because if she moved to save herself, the maneuver element reached the base of our wall, and we died. She held. That is the whole of it, and it is everything. She held. The maneuver element broke somewhere in the 4th or 5th minute. There's a moment in a fight where the enemy's will goes, where they stop being an attack and start being men who want to be somewhere else. And I felt it happen in the Dushara the way you feel weather change. The volume of fire coming down off the south wall stuttered, thinned, and then began to pull back and up, men peeling off their positions and climbing away from a pass that had turned, impossibly, into a place where their perfect ambush was dying under a single rifle they could not silence. "They're breaking," Vale said on the net, and for the first time there was the faintest thing under the calm, not triumph. She never once sounded triumphant, but a kind of grim confirmation, the sound of a professional watching a read come true. "South walls displacing. Don't chase them. I say again, do not chase, let them go. Get your convoy consolidated, get me a casualty count. I'll cover the pass until you're ready to move the walking wounded up to the shoulder trail. There's a saddle behind me, a bird can reach." We didn't chase them. We did exactly what she said, because at that point I would have followed that voice off a cliff. We consolidated. We got our count, and it was a count of living men that had no business being alive. A lead truck's worth and a 3 trucks worth of men who should by every law of that kill zone have been left in the Dushara for good, and were instead bleeding and breathing and starring up at a shoulder of rock where a shape was finally, slowly, rising to one knee. I climbed up to her myself. I don't know exactly why, except that I could not send another man to do it. I went up the broken ground she'd climbed in the dark, and it was hard going even in daylight, even without an enemy, and I thought about her doing it alone in the blue dark with a rifle on her back after I'd told her no, and by the time I reached the shoulder I could barely look at her. She was field stripping nothing, cleaning nothing, doing none of the things a man imagines a shooter does after. She was just kneeling by her rifle, breathing, looking down at the pass she'd emptied. The rock around her was chewed to pale gravel where all that fire had come searching. There was blood on her sleeve, rock spall, not around, I'd learn, a long shallow tear across her forearm she hadn't so much as wrapped. Her hands were steady. Her face, when she turned it up to me, was the same weathered calm it had been on the bird, like she'd stepped down off the slick 5 minutes ago instead of into the middle of hell and out the far side. I didn't have words. I'm not a man who's ever had many at the right time. What came out of me was the truth, which was all I had left after the day had burned every certainty out of me. "I benched you," I said. "I put the ceiling at 800 meters. I let my man call you the schoolhouse. I told you to keep your head down and let my guys work. I had to stop. You climbed up here in the dark on a plan I killed at the fire, and you held this rock through all of that, and every man down there is alive because you didn't listen to a word I said." She looked at me for a long moment, that measuring look, and then she looked back down at the pass, and when she spoke it wasn't to wound me. It was to teach me, the way she'd been trying to teach me since the fire, the only way she knew how, which was plain. "I let you decide who I was, Chief," she said. "Back at the staging hide. I could have handed you my file and ended it, and you'd have believed the paper for about an hour and then gone right back to seeing a range coach because a man who's told a thing argues with it." She worked her jaw, watching the pass. "So I let you see it instead. It's a harder way, costs more, but there's no arguing with what a man watches with his own eyes. She finally looked back at me. You don't owe me an apology. You'd have paid me back better by trusting the reed at the neck and slowing your lead. But you're standing here and your men are down there, so we'll call the tuition paid. The tuition. Like the whole thing had been a lesson she'd agreed to teach at a price she'd known going in. The bird came for the wounded off the saddle behind the shoulder an hour later, and that's where I learned who she actually was, because the flight crew knew before I did. The corpsman off the medevac was working down the line of our wounded when he got to where Vale sat with her forearm finally wrapped, and he clocked the rifle, and he clocked her, and something moved across his face. He was a talker, that corpsman, the way the good ones are to keep the wounded's minds off the flight, and he'd been all over that theater, and he looked at her rifle and then at her, and he said a word, a call sign, half a question. Kestrel. She didn't answer. Didn't have to. The not answering was the answer, and I watched it land on the corpsman like a hand on the back of the neck. He turned to me while he worked low, the way you pass something you can't quite believe you're the one to pass. Chief, you know who your attachment is. That's Kestrel. That's the Overwatch on. And he named an operation, a bad one, a famous in the quiet community bad one, a compromised element deep in the wrong valley with the whole world coming down on them and no way out. The kind of night that becomes a name men say carefully. Everybody who came off that ridge came off it because one gun on a rock a mile and a half out held the whole approach open till the birds got in. Nobody ever saw the shooter. Nobody topside would confirm the record. But every operator who walked off that ridge knows the call sign, and the call sign's Kestrel, and he nodded down at the woman wrapping her own arm. That's her. That's the gun. A mile and a half, 2,400 meters, holding a whole approach open, alone, unconfirmed, uncredited, a call sign whispered by the men she'd saved and denied by everyone above them. And we had put the ceiling at 800 meters, by the fire, laughing. I went back down the slope to my men, and I did not have to tell them, because the corpsman's kind of news travels a huddle of wounded operators faster than any order. And by the time I reached the bottom they already knew. I could see it in how they were sitting. I could see it in Ray's, who had joked louder than anyone and who now sat with his back against the north wall, staring up at the shoulder like a man staring at a thing in a church. She came down last, the way she'd done everything. After, quiet, self-sufficient, her rifle cased now, her ruck cinched high, moving down the broken ground at that same altitude-wise pace. And here is the moment I will carry out of the Dushara Pass and out of this life, the moment that is the whole reason I'm telling you any of it. She reached the bottom and my team was there, 20-some men who a day before had laughed her onto the rear vehicle, and there was no order given. I want that understood. Nobody called it. No officer said the word. It rose up out of the men on its own, out of that place beneath rank where soldiers keep the things they actually believe. And it started with Ray's of the mouth, Ray's of the schoolhouse joke. Ray's came up off the wall and onto his feet and brought his hand up in a salute so hard and so full it shook. And one after another down the whole broken line of that convoy the men stood, wounded and whole, and they saluted the sergeant with the bolt gun. I have seen salutes my whole life, rendered on parade, snapped at colors, offered to rank because rank is owed it. I had never before that morning seen a salute that was purely the thing itself with nothing owed about it, not owed to a bar or a leaf or an eagle on a collar, because she outranked not one of the officers present, but rendered because every man in that pass had watched with his own eyes what she was and could not keep his hand down. It was the forced respect the whole hard world tries to withhold from someone like her. And the Dushara had forced it out of us all at once and for good, and it was total. I brought my own hand up last and slowest, because I had the furthest to travel to get there. I had set the ceiling. I had benched her. I had killed her plan at the fire and told her to keep her head down, and she had climbed a rock in the dark and held it through hell and handed me back my men and called the tuition paid. My salute cost me more than any I've ever rendered, and it was the truest one of my life. She let us hold it a moment. Then she did the last thing, the thing that told me she was exactly the kind of person the corpsman said she was. She didn't let us drown in it. She brought her own hand up easy and returned it to the whole line at once, and she said, in that same level voice she'd used to say understood on the bird 100 years ago at dawn, "At ease, gentlemen, we've all still got the walk out, a beat." The faintest thing at the corner of her mouth that on another face would have been a smile. "And Chief, next time, slow your lead at the neck. I won't always be up the rock ahead of you." We walked out of the Talve that afternoon, the walking carrying the wounded, down out of the high cold country with our dead honored and our living improbable, and I have thought about the Dushara Pass nearly every day since. People who hear the story want it to be about the shot, the distance, the count, the impossible geometry of one bolt gun unmaking a horseshoe ambush from an exposed shoulder while a whole enemy tried to erase her. And that was real, and it was the finest piece of gunwork I ever expect to witness, and I will tell that part in bars for the rest of my life. But that isn't what I carry. What I carry is the sound. That deep, deliberate, unhurried report rolling down the rock walls of the pass, one, and a long, patient pause, and the bolt worked, and one again while the whole world screamed and bled. In a fight that was pure panic and volume and hope, one person spent single rounds like a surgeon spends cuts, never rushing, each one a whole decision made complete, and every one of them landing on the exact throat of the exact thing that was killing us, in the exact order that saved us. I had heard that sound and thought it was the wrong tool for the day. It was the only right thing in the entire pass. I had looked at her at the staging hide and decided in 10 seconds who she was: a checkbox, a schoolhouse ticket, a body to keep alive. And I had been so completely, so dangerously wrong that men I loved nearly died of my certainty. She had known I'd be wrong. She'd let me be wrong and paid the tuition of that in the hardest coin there is. And then she'd climbed a rock alone in the dark and made me right about the one thing that mattered, which was that they were coming home. I don't set ceilings anymore. Not on anyone. That's the thing she taught me on that shoulder at that price. You do not get to decide in 10 seconds who a person is. You do not get to hang the frame and then fit the facts to it. Somewhere out there is a shooter you'd bench, a nurse you'd overlook, a quiet sergeant off a bird you'd laugh onto the rear vehicle, and they may be the only reason you walk out of your own Dushara Pass alive. I met mine on a cold morning in the Talve, and I laughed at her by a fire, and she saved my whole team without once raising her voice. And the last thing she did before the bird carried her off to wherever the quiet ones go next was tell me, kindly, to slow down and trust the reed next time. I've slowed down. I trust the reed. And on the bad nights, the ones where the certainty tries to come creeping back the way it does, I listen for that sound in my memory, one, and a pause, and the bolt worked. And I remember the exact shape and weight of how wrong a certain man can be, and how a woman I'd written off in 10 seconds reached down off a rock and gave me back my men and my humility in the same patient breath. Her call sign was Kestrel. My team never once used it. We'd earned the right to something better and we knew it, so to the last man we called her what the Dushara Pass had made her to us, which was simply and forever Sergeant.